All right, everyone, I think we fixed the sound. Let us know if the sound is fixed. So I'm assuming that not many people heard what I was saying earlier, so I'll go ahead and say it again. We have Erica Arcudi and Chelsea Lang and Alex Venezia painting this evening, and the lovely Riley modeling for us this evening. If you want reference images, click on the link in the show notes, and it will take you to a place for you to submit your email, and you will have access to all the reference images from all of the East Oaks Painting from Life evenings. Love to hear where you're from, and please submit questions, and we are happy you're joining us this evening. All right, without further ado, we'll get back to everyone's paintings.
I feel like we should kick off by asking what everyone wants Louis to paint at Portrait Society for his demo.
Do you have an idea?
Absolutely not. I want to know what everyone else's idea would be. All I know is that it's supposed to be interactive.
Everyone could have VR glasses on.
Oh my gosh. That'd be really cool. Riley has like the perfect expression. Like I'm just getting like the best eyebrow over here from my side.
Okay, so it looks like we've got some people joining on. We've got somebody from Alabama and somebody from Kansas and Canada. So today, since we're painting in a new room, I wanted to ask y'all, how much do you feel your environment when you're working might affect your painting process or the final product?
Yes.
Why?
Because you were talking about the light.
That actually is a good question for a few reasons. I think about also kind of where you live, because I think of like Andrew Wyeth or something like that, and how his environment just had so much to do with what his paintings were of. And then like I haven't had a good north kind of consistent natural lighting, so I've been having to paint more outdoor figures because of that reason. So yeah, it has, I feel like, has a big impact sometimes.
Do you feel like it'll have an impact this evening? Like, is there something you're considering for this setup?
Well, for this setup, you probably can't see it on cameras, but right now we have a light to the upper left and then a huge window to the right, and it's daytime, and in an hour it will be nighttime. So the lighting on her face is going to be a lot different. So that will definitely affect things. It will be interesting. Other than that, I don't know.
I think it's interesting that because you don't have a consistent light source, you paint outside, which is a notoriously inconsistent light source.
Well, I feel like it's not even so much that I don't have a consistent light source, but that it's like, maybe because I'm like on the basement level, it's like the light only comes in like 5 inches.
Angle-wise. Yeah.
Like it,
Oh, the intensity?
yeah, just it, they have to be like right next to like the window pane to get any light.
Right, right.
And whenever I use an artificial light, I can just tell it looks artificial.
Yeah.
In terms of like light on the model or light on your painting?
Yes, the light on the model. Yeah.
How often are you bringing in a model to paint outside versus working off of like a photograph indoors?
So I've been working actually decently a lot with models from life inside, but just with a artificial light source. Just because I've been wanting to do more practice and then hopefully turn them into something more, but I haven't done recently many. The best lighting is when it's at like right about now, right before it gets dark. And the mosquitoes are hell. Oh yeah, Chelsea, I skimmed through your video of you copying that Sargent like just a few days ago.
Oh yeah.
Because I remember you brought it up in the last session. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It was certainly like a really fun painting. I feel like there's nothing that sets you up to feel, I don't know, because it can go various ways, but I feel like there's something about a master study that makes you feel like, oh, he was a human being. Like, still absurd in his skill level. And there's still always going to be so much to learn, but like, just being able to replicate some of that brushwork feels really empowering.
Yeah, even if you get close to it, you can be like, I can see what he did there.
Yeah. I feel pretty certain I'm going to have a drawing problem on this. We shall see.
I need to get a measuring stick.
Working on a different surface than I usually do, and like nothing is behaving the way that I expect, even though I know the surface. I just haven't worked on this in a while.
What kind of a surface is it?
This is a Clausen's lead primed like portrait linen. I think it's like the L64C. It's a lot smoother and it absorbs a little bit differently than their like double primed oil surface. And my Rosemary Ivory Filbert, it's like a touch like heavy-handed for what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I work on pretty smooth surfaces all the time, and ivory bristle type brushes just, I feel like, do not work.
Yep, I'm finding that, and that's like the only kind of brush I brought today, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, all my brushes are just super soft.
So, Alex, I'm noticing you're using like a woodless graphite. Do you generally have a preference towards that, or is that something you could talk about?
Yeah, it's a charcoal stick, and it's either vine or willow, and I don't have like a specific brand, especially if it's a drawing for a painting, but just kind of whatever they have at the art store. It just is so easily erased. I could even just like wipe my hand over it and it would disappear. So, and I feel like it has a bit more control than when I try and draw with paint. So yeah, for those two reasons, I really like to draw directly on the canvas with it.
You will usually start with paint, though. Is your choice to do this to do with the fact that you're waiting for it to get dark?
Strategy.
I don't know, my mind just changes all the time.
Fair enough.
But yeah, if it was really consistent right now and it was going to stay, maybe I would just slap down some paint. That could be part of it. But my most recent video that I did with East Oaks, this is how I started it, with this kind of charcoal.
And that's your like indirect painting.
Yes.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who watched that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see like the reference image like being painted a lot, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's Rochelle. That's my model.
Like today when I was drawing.
Oh yes, exactly. Yeah. I passed Erica and she was drawing the reference images from that class. I was like, oh, hey.
I was preparing for painting from life. And I wanted to draw
God,
a face.
so badly want to start putting color information in.
So it looks like we've got a couple folks from New Zealand this time around. And also Joellen says, Chelsea, you're an amazing artist. I listen to you all the time.
Well, thank you, Joellen. Thanks for watching.
Joellen. Oh, that's a cool name.
There's a part of me that's like, okay, if I just paint the light side of her face, could I possibly be safe? But I feel like the answer to that is no.
One of my questions for y'all today is kind of inspired by some reading that I've been doing, but I was wondering if y'all have any particular favorite art quotes, whether it's quotes about art or either quotes by an artist. Yeah.
I always recommend Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. He has some really interesting chapters on, of course, like how to approach things in landscape painting, but he also has things about like design and composition that I think are really cool. And just his philosophy. It's just, I like to peruse that every so often.
Carlson's Guide to Landscape.
Yeah, I have not read that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've never heard of
I'll bring it in one of these days.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Alex and Chelsea, do you all
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's good.
It's just me.
I got you.
Ooh. Okay.
Oh, I do have one soft brush.
Favorite quote.
I don't think I have a lot of art quotes. Just handy. I think I have things that I feel like are art adjacent. I really like Brene Brown talking about Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech, which is essentially, it isn't the critic who counts. And the quote is very long, and so I won't be able to remember it verbatim, but like, it's the man in the arena who's there with you, getting the tar beat out of him, basically, whose opinion counts. I feel like that's especially relevant to art, especially if you put your work on the internet. You know, the person whose opinion matters is the one who is out there making work with you and putting it out there in a meaningful way, because they're going to understand what you're dealing with, and they're going to know how to be sensitive to all the considerations that you have about your work.
Yep, I like that.
If anyone wants to like pull up that quote and post it in the chat, it's a good one.
There's like a Bonnat, Leon Bonnat, some 19th century painter, and one of his like super simple quotes, but it always, if I'm stuck and I can't go any further with the painting, it's something super simple, like, at first make it like, and then make it more like.
I like that.
And it's like,
It's so simple, but it's so perfect.
it's like, or make it as much like the thing as you can, and then maybe step away for a bit, and then make it more like the thing. And for some reason that helps me when I can't figure out how to make it more like the thing. I need to find it, because
It's like one of the simplest and yet most complicated and difficult things to do.
Yeah. I feel like it's also very helpful in just giving you permission to start. Like, you don't have to have a perfect plan, just get something down.
Yeah.
Let's see. Scott Vesper asks, is there a language of drawing that then gives way to a language of painting? If so, at what point?
I think that, I mean, if I am interpreting the question correctly or fairly, I think it depends on the way in which you work. I know some painters who develop the entire painting as if it's a drawing in oil pastel. And the way that they think about laying marks down is very much based on really key drawing landmarks. But I also feel like I know a lot of people who don't think that way, and I'm sure there's many other ways you could interpret that question. Alex, did you have any epiphanies? I heard you mulling it over there.
I don't know. Did the timer just go off though?
Were you hoping to get saved?
Yes, the timer just went off. And so Riley, you can take a break for a moment. And before we go on break, I'm going to read the quote that Chelsea was talking about by Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error. and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. It's an excellent quote.
All right, y'all. So we will be right back shortly, just after this model break. Thanks so much. So much for joining.
Yeah, that's close enough for me. Does that work for you?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, I feel like I had one view that's very much this, and then there was a section where you kind of turned more toward Alex.
Like on the chair.
The tape is
It's
pretty
lined
lined up, yeah.
Interesting. Do you think it's my legs being up that's changing it?
I'm not.
I think you had this earlier, but
We're doing some model repositioning, y'all. Hang on one second.
Enough where I can, if I needed to, I could make changes and it's not a big deal. As long as you're comfortable, then.
I remembered I had one soft brush that I brought. And I use it to death.
So just to sort of recall Scott's question again, just because I feel like it's pertinent to this stage of the process. Is there a language of drawing that then gives way to a language of painting? Which I think, at this particular moment, seeing the ways that the three of you approach the same subject so differently, it's really compelling.
I'll say that I was always taught that basically drawing and painting are the same thing. Or painting is just drawing but with a different medium. And so sometimes not separating them so much can actually be really beneficial. That you're dealing with the same concepts, you're just switching mediums.
Yeah, like that. I read this book, Against the Modern, but it's about Dagnon Bouverie, and it talks about the 19th century training and how they had to do these. They had like assignments where they were given a prompt and had to do these big multi-figure compositions and super strict timelines and stuff. And reading about it, a lot of it was like they had the models for only a certain amount of time, and they did drawings with a lot of information, and then a lot of the painting was just done with drawings, with just like no color information directly available of that exact model, and they were just using the drawings and their knowledge of color and probably like referencing themselves or something, I'm not sure, but it seemed like more so back in the day, it was even more drawing than kind of an impressionistic painting approach. Anyway, if that makes sense.
It's interesting you make that distinction, because one painter I know who is very much thinking about drawing to build up her entire painting is an impressionist, but she started with oil pastel, which I think informed a lot of how she builds up the image. So I think it just goes to show that there's, I don't know, a lot of different modalities there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a painter I just recently found that I really like, but it's oil paint, but it almost looks like oil pastel, like all of these little tick marks that I just think is such a beautiful way to go about it.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a lot of calligraphy that you can get excited about when you work that way.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what those paintings might have looked like, Alex, because I know there's like a way to really think about the drawing the whole way through that gets you something very tight and very exacting, and there's a way to go about it that lets you get a little bit more calligraphy in and a little bit of like looseness and more gesture in the drawing.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Just say everything you said.
Yeah, it wasn't super good. I was just thinking, like, I feel like it really took me ages to find my words there, so it wouldn't be any slower to just repeat it.
Actually, Chelsea, I wanted to ask you, did you do a wash on your panel first, or are you working without one?
Without a wash, I am kind of creating one a little bit. I started very dry, and I realized that's really not how I want this surface to be. Working drier on a more textured surface is more enjoyable, so I'm kind of going back in and like erasing and refining a little bit of the drawing, and in the process I think that's creating a little bit of a wash actually, but not in the traditional sense. Good. Hopefully I can correct some of my drawing mistakes.
Let's see. So Nandini says her favorite quote is, "Inspiration exists everywhere, but it has to find you while you're working." And that's from Picasso. So that's a great point. If any of y'all who are tuning in out there want to share your favorite art quotes or art-related quotes, yeah, please share them. I'd love to hear them. So another question that I had, slightly inspired by some of my technical trip-ups today so far, which I'm sorry for, but it gave me the idea to ask, how has your relationship with technology perhaps impacted your identity or practice as an artist?
I really want to know the backstory to this question.
Just me being a technological troglodyte, and yeah, pretty much just that.
What does it look like in practice?
Was that for Evie or?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, I'm sorry, say it again.
What did that look like in practice? Like, what was the thing that happened?
I mean, just like in my day-to-day life, kind of being clumsy with technology, but then more specifically at the start of the video when the sound wasn't on.
In fairness, I just was on mute while I was like sharing all this stuff, so I don't know that I'm the one who should answer this.
I don't know, I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with technology. In some ways it helps us so much, but you know, definitely is very distracting.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I fight the most, is how distracting technology can be. So
Yeah, if you could just get rid of that part,
yeah.
it can be really useful.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, even it's like, I've been using Pinterest a lot to just collect ideas and paintings I want to reference later for compositional things or brush or mark making and stuff. And I save all these pictures. It's like, I'm going to go back to these and actually study them. But instead I just refresh the homepage and see what new things it's going to show me. Like, but there could be something new.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, it's like, I need to turn that button off and just look at what I've already saved for a reason.
I was talking about this with a friend, and basically we were saying, don't feel so bad. These things are actually built for you to stay on them and find more ways. So, you know.
Yeah, that is
A book I really like about this is Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. He's a journalist more so than a researcher, but just does a really great job of interviewing a lot of smart people to talk about like what we know about a lot of things regarding mental health specifically, but his most recent book is about technology and distraction and just kind of the state of all of those things and what we can do about them individually and what really has to be more of like a collective change. And yeah, it speaks directly to this question. So like as a result, I have notifications turned off on my phone. I have, I don't know, just like certain rules for how I interact with technology and like when I need to cut myself off, not just from a productivity standpoint, but from a well-being standpoint. Oh, I just want to go into the colors so bad.
I know, I'm like really holding myself back.
Yeah. I feel like it's going to be an interesting sort of experiment to see where we get at the end of tonight compared to where we might typically wind up.
I just know that if I rush ahead now, I will be kicking myself later.
Yeah.
So like, try to orient myself a little bit more. It'll be worth it.
Right, yeah. One thing I'm looking at on her, and I know this is going to change a little bit, but I think it's still going to be really relevant, is that like all of her skin tone is, I don't know, the color is really beautiful. It's also going to have to be, for me, toned down with a lot of Viridian. And it's hard for me to see. And it's the kind of thing where I almost would want to paint it, you know, with just Terra Rosa and white or whatever my go-to color would be for mixing skin tone, but I know that'd be way too chromatic. And then I just wish I could like glaze it later to tone the chroma down. So I'm gonna have to come up with some strategy to mix my color more effectively.
Yeah, it's interesting because you know, you bring up a point about wanting to keep the painting and, or approach the painting in a certain way that if you paint on top of it, then it'll almost finish it in a different way, strategically. And I can relate to that for my own work since I don't really do alla prima unless I'm doing a study for something. And so, I mean, I've said before that my work always benefits from multiple passes, and so I'm sure that I'll be feeling that today.
Yeah, I feel like this will be probably like especially tricky for me just because my way of working is like, okay, just on to the next thing, let's go.
I feel almost like a sports announcer saying this though, but perhaps more than some other sessions I've seen, y'all kind of seem like you're keeping the pace with each other fairly consistently. Yeah, I feel like I'm a sports announcer, but art sports.
What a defensive move that Alex made after watching Chelsea pull that brush across the canvas.
Oh, but Erica's coming up on the rear. Oh, here she comes.
I should do the face, but we're not doing that.
I might just not touch paint the whole night.
Hey, drawing one of these would be cool. I'd be down for that.
Ooh, I want to hear ideas for our 30th session. Like what people want to see for us to mix it up.
Yeah, we could take a crowd poll or something. See what people are interested in.
We're bringing in a lot of unicorn.
Oh, I can provide one of those. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that'd be great. Okay, I feel like maybe her top is high chroma enough that I could safely block that in. I don't know.
Let's see. RT asks, when you're painting a portrait with a mix of tight and loose brushstrokes, how do you decide which type of brushstrokes will go where?
I feel like that depends on the painter and like kind of how you work, but I'm curious if y'all agree with that.
Personally, I'm going wild with this background. Both because I am just trying to cover the canvas, and also I know that the longer I work, the tighter it gets, and so if I can maintain some energy through the painting, it ends up benefiting me. And so I'll try to, maintain some of this brushstroke. I'll try not to kill it, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be thinking too much about it with this painting, but with my paintings in general, I tend to try and start kind of a bit more loose, have a bit more broken color, and a bit more interest and brushwork like that. And then as I come into multiple layers, then I start to kind of sculpt the form, and hopefully some of the residual brushy work will be kept, and then there will be some parts where it becomes smoother, and there's sort of this play in between the two where it ends up that I tend to like. But yeah, it totally varies from painter to painter. And I feel like each spot, there's not a formula. It kind of just feels right or it doesn't in a particular spot. But I mean, you could go more impasto-y in areas in like the lighter, bonier areas. And that's kind of, I guess, a formula-ish thing that you could do. I wouldn't go impasto-y thick in the shadows, for instance. So.
Yeah.
I think too, like, doing a super loose brush stroke with two different kinds of brushes can have completely different effects. So it also really depends on the kind of brush that you're using and what you're trying to communicate to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good thing to be good at, is you're doing it because of what you're trying to communicate, which is so hard as well to even know.
Yeah.
But yeah, when anything can be done with intention, it's a good idea. like there's a lot of, I was at a museum in Virginia recently, and it's this portrait, but the girl has this jewelry on, and all of the features in the portrait are just so soft, but then the jewelry is painted super sharp edges, and it just creates such a beautiful effect, and that, you know, was just perfectly like executed, very intentional, and that was the artist's game plan. Like you can tell the intention, so that's one example I just thought
of. Scott says that his favorite quote is, "Problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them," and that's from Albert Einstein. So some food for thought for our next session, because we just went on a model break. So keep going ahead and submitting your favorite quotes and your questions and comments, or just say hi, and we'll be back with you shortly. Thanks so much. For joining.
It's weird.
Jose Rivera says, "Hello from Michigan, joining live for the first time. It's great to be with you all."
Great to have you.
of. Yeah, nice. First time.
And Felicity Bergstrom asks, if you had to choose between 100 days of alla prima painting and 100 days of one-on-one painting, what would you choose? Also, which would be more beneficial in terms of learning for you?
One painting?
I assume by like process of elimination, we're just talking like indirect painting, but maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know that term.
Because
Yeah, I think the implication there is 100 days of either alla prima, working on multiple subjects, of course, versus 100 days of working on one singular composition. Like, which one would you rather do, and which one do you think would be more beneficial to your learning?
I feel like it has to be a combination of both. I mean, I know that's not what you're going for, but I think that having the time to focus on something, really taking your time and studying it thoroughly is so beneficial, but then doing alla prima is great for decision making, for trial and error with composition. And just your kind of brushstrokes and that kind of energy, so many things. And so I know that this is a halfway answer, but I feel like you got to do both.
yeah, I would say do your 100 alla primas and then do 100 hours of on one, and that one will be a lot better.
The whiny teenager in me is like,
I think, though, that there's something about doing the thing that's a little bit more challenging, more uncomfortable. You know, like if you're maybe comfortable doing something you're spending a long time on it, maybe it's beneficial to do the alla prima painting
for
to
sure.
really like work out that muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too. Like whatever because I know people who I know that there's students who just start things and never spend enough time on something.
I think
So
that
if
is
it's-
entirely me.
If that's the case, then yes, do the opposite.
Is your teenager coming out?
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, okay, if y'all will tell me what to do for 100 straight days, it's on.
Sounds like an empty.
I actually took a residency like in 2019 before the pandemic with an artist who actually then during the pandemic literally did 100 days alla prima, 100 different faces. And I think it really helped their practice a lot. So, you know.
I feel like, I hope it wasn't 100 consecutive days, because I know even doing like the Strata Challenge, that burns me out real quick. Like I just need a day to like watch TV. I have learned. Or not come up with an idea for something.
Free time is sacred.
What is this Strata challenge that you're not allowed to watch TV at?
Only
So-
paint.
Are you being at all facetious, or should I actually say what the Strata Challenge is?
I genuinely don't know what it is.
Okay, cool. So Brian Mark Taylor, Strata, they have a challenge every September and I think every January. It's a 30-day challenge to paint from life every day that month. And you don't necessarily have to complete a painting, so you could take that and do one super long still life. Or for me, that's super long. Or you could do like 30 paintings alla prima, or you could do something in between.
Wait, for how many days straight?
30
You just have to paint for 30 days straight.
from life.
Oh,
That's
I should be recording
What?
portrait doing this. Coursing every day.
that's our job.
yeah.
I feel like that kind of feels like the oil painter's version of Inktober.
Yes, 100%.
I have heard of Inktober.
I think it's kind of funny that you've heard of Inktober, but not the Strata Challenge.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that.
Okay. Ugh. I should-
It looks so much like that. I'm really impressed.
Oh, thank you, Divya.
Thank you.
But I know when people say that to me, it like psychs me out.
You cracked me up earlier when we were starting because you were just like down there, like not even up the stairs, but just looking between the railings, like an adorable gremlin. I really wanted to say something, but like Louie was doing the intro that no one heard, so. Oh, this is not the brush for this job.
Time for color.
So, from what I briefly heard about alla prima painting and kind of working slowly on a painting, I have a question. Well, firstly, Chelsea, do you feel like your temperament kind of suits alla prima more? And and also, Erica and Alex, how do you guys feel like reflecting on your own temperament and behavior, what kind of painting suits you?
How I like to think about things. I like to go slow. Yet there's a part of it where it does require kind of quick decision making and strategy, and so like all of that kind of stuff I find really interesting. So, and I think if you can find a way to paint that really reflects your temperament, I think you're just on your way to finding your voice. So I think that's cool.
I feel like there's an extent to which I kind of am having to like fight my temperament a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could totally tighten up and like fall into the trap of perfectionism with a longer, slower painting. And so I deliberately think in all prima terms and probably err on the side of just being done instead of like really taking something as far as I can. So I feel like that is all to say that there's like a part of me that really wants to work differently in my personality, and I kind of fight it in terms of what I choose to paint or how I choose to paint.
What I think is interesting is that it's not always like one note, you know, like people are complex. And so,
Yeah.
you know, even if somebody's working faster or somebody's working slower, it's not because it's just one aspect of their personality. Like usually it is some sort of combination of
Yeah.
the tension between two sides.
Yeah.
And,
Well
and then
said.
just it's like how it turns out, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, I don't know if this is what Divya meant, but I feel like your temperament or your mood could impact the way that like your body moves as you're painting, and like the dynamicism of your brush strokes and things like that. And you know, maybe like psychologically there's, you know, if you're in kind of a bad mood, then maybe that somehow impacts the feeling of the final work.
Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, he talks about verism and how, and you know, it's kind of like realism, but instead it's finding a kind of truth based off of your personal experience. And long story short, like your emotions or what you care about or something influences the selections you make when you're painting from life. And so that's why it's, not every painting will look the same, even if it's the same subject. And so it's kind of cool to think about it if, you know, from that point of view.
And it's verism, like
Verism, like ver.
Oh yeah,
like truth.
like truth. Yeah.
So you said there.
Verism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the experience of being there.
Being
I was
there.
like, yeah,
It could work.
Yeah.
Erica, I thought you were saying voyeurism, but then I started thinking like, okay, rather than you, the artist, being the voyeur, the painting that you're creating is the voyeur into like your temperament. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's a funny misinterpretation.
It could work. It could be a thing. Okay, it's time.
So we've got another question from New York artist. What is the best and worst thing about teaching?
Best thing about teaching is, I mean, I teach and I love it. I love being able to help people kind of open the way that they can see. And so being a part of someone's journey like that and like sharing things that like when I was younger I would have just like loved to have known. You know, being a part of that for someone is really cool. I don't know about what worst thing. Maybe it's, I mean, it takes time and energy like anything, but I don't know if that's necessarily like the worst thing.
I feel like the hardest part of it is that you can't do the work for somebody. Like it'd be so easy, I feel like, if I could just say, okay, you are going to spend 6 months and you're just going to be doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
And if you put in that effort, you are going to get those results. But that's kind of easy for,
Yeah.
you know, the teacher to say. And so there's never any guarantee that somebody won't kind of get distracted or lose interest, or,
Yeah.
you know, you can't want it more than they want it.
Yeah. Was it you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink?
Yeah.
Maybe the challenge is that you can't really multitask. So there are paintings, and there are people you want to teach, but you can't do them simultaneously.
What do you think about
I don't teach very often, but I just somewhat recently taught a it was a lot of work. Like way more than I was expecting.
that? What were some of the things that surprised you? Or like what were the kinds of work you weren't prepared for?
Well, maybe it was just because I had 15 students. And just, you want to give every single one, just your best. And the same amount of time and getting around to everybody and meeting each one on their particular level. It's definitely hard job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is awesome when you know the student is really serious and they're taking on board what you're saying and actually you feel like because of how much they care, they have potential to actually make it. So a lot of great things about it.
So I kind of maybe want to piggyback and turn that question on its head a little bit. What do you think is the most difficult part about being a student?
Probably like having trust in the process and having that faith or confidence that if you put in work, you will see results. I feel like when people kind of falter in terms of consistency, I think that's one of the main reasons why that might happen.
Yeah, playing the long game. Just a lot of wanting it too quickly.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, that's knowing that it's like set a 10-year goal, not like a 1-month goal.
Yeah.
I've had some students who've struggled with what to do with the previous lessons they've been taught. And so if you've learned, something from someone else and then you're being told something contradictory, kind of like what to do with that. And over time, you might find out that both ways are good. And there are multiple approaches, but kind of juggling that as a student can be challenging. I remember as a student, long story short, at hearing some critiques that say this is just very simple, but one teacher says darken the background, next teacher says to lighten the background, and then you're as a student, you're like, what do I do? And you just kind of try both, but ultimately, though, you through your experience and seeing both ways, you see how both methods can create different looks, but the effect can still work. And so, sometimes it's about just putting aside the things that you've been taught in the past, and almost just setting aside as okay, that's one approach. And then separating a bit and saying this is a second approach that I'm learning, kind of diving in that way, and that way you don't have to feel like, oh, what I learned was wrong, and and so, because that might not actually be the case.
That just made me think of the last question, like the hardest thing about being a teacher, and you saying like make the background lighter and the other says make it darker makes me think about how to teach, like leave your own kind of, don't teach just with your aesthetic point of view, but just in an objective way that can help them reach their own, you know, aesthetic goals. Because I feel like that is just an aesthetic decision that they were both like, I think it would look better if the background was lighter.
Yeah. Or like you're trying to create contrast or atmosphere or something, and there's just multiple ways of doing that.
Yeah, so explaining why maybe.
Yeah, I try to, when I'm teaching, I do try to focus on the reasoning behind the decision, or why I would tell somebody something. I'll try to explain the reasoning behind it, so it's not just like, because I said so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I typically like want to know a lot about a particular artist's goal before I weigh in on what the appropriate course of action would be, because just because I might solve a problem one way doesn't mean that's appropriate for what that particular painter really wants to do with their work.
Yeah.
All right, y'all, we're gonna press the proverbial pause button, take another model break, and we'll be back shortly. Thanks so much. All right, y'all, we are back for another session. Thanks so much for joining.
You're such a good MC.
Yeah, I have my radio host voice.
Yeah, whenever I record voiceovers for YouTube, I always like try and channel NPR. Oh man.
I'm seeing the Viridian too, Chelsea.
You're what now?
Seeing the Viridian.
Oh, good.
Cool notes.
That was, you know, I had to hold my breath for a long time on whether y'all would call me crazy.
Now that's another story.
Yeah, I need to cool like all of my color off. Oh, that's good. It's good to be seen, you know?
So we've got a couple of questions from folks. Neeks asks, to oil paint on wood panels, can I simply gesso or oil prime them, or do they need to be sealed first? If yes, what's the best sealant to use?
I haven't actually prepped wood before, so I'm gonna let someone else answer this.
Yeah, neither have I.
Okay, I've only done it like one time. I believe you do need to have something in between the gesso and the wood. I think rabbit skin glue was how I did it. You do that first because that will prevent the oil from seeping into the wood. But Lewis, feel free to correct me on that.
Can, but also I think most people would just use linseed oil.
Oh, cool.
Linseed oil is mainly what your pallets are sealed with before you start your wood pallets. So it acts as a sealant as well.
Just makes me think of like seasoning a cast iron pan.
See, that's funny. I've actually, every time I've done it, I've always been told to use PVA. So yeah, many answers.
My understanding is that PVA is just like the modern, more archival version of rabbit skin glue, so I feel like that tracks. Okay, my goal for this painting is to see if I can successfully explore like really capturing the color harmony of her skin tone and how much this really does tend toward green while still, like obviously she has like very like glowing, what's the word I want? Like thinking like Galadriel in Lord of the Rings, you know, it's just majestic, but it's pulling toward green in this light. And that's really difficult for me to, like my brain fights me in terms of choosing to mix that color successfully.
I know, I'm like, red.
Yeah, yep, I'm just like, pink, got it, go.
Wait a minute. Do you mean the scene of Galadriel when she's like in evil Galadriel mode and then she's like super green?
No. I'm glad I could clarify that.
Because I was kind of close to that shade of green.
No, not that Viridian.
So our next question, when painting portraits, do you prefer to pre-mix your colors or to mix them as you go?
I adapt to the model. I'll pre-mix, like I'll make a string, but then or make strings or something, but then I'll definitely adapt to whatever I see in front of me. And then it'll change when I'm painting. So, but I like having the structure, like it's mostly I do it for values, just so I know where I'm going, and then it's easier to tweak it rather than to just do it on the fly.
I do everything on the fly, but definitely think there would be a lot of benefit to spending some time at the beginning to pre-mix.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, I definitely had that Richard Schmid influence of just clean your palette often and mix everything on the fly.
Yeah, I forget how much of what I do is based on Richard Schmid teaching.
Ooh. I would be very curious to hear like your own assessment of what that looks like for you.
I don't know. But just like so much of what I learned was just from Alla Prima, the book, and then just people who would talk about Richard, like Jeremy Lipking and stuff. And then I feel like now I kind of do that, but apply sort of a somewhat Grand Central Atelier form painting approach with the Richard Schmid, and I'm somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah. Well, apparently, like after he was recovering from having some back problems, he had taken time off painting and was doing some work to kind of reset and get back in the groove. And he went back to like a very academic approach in that time. So I could see how those two things could successfully commingle.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got another comment from Renee from Fort Myers, Florida. Hi, Renee. She asks, when doing commission work, do you take pictures or work directly with the subject for portraits?
What I've done in the past has been pictures because I've painted a lot of like kids and animals, but at the same time I know Louis paints a lot of kids and does quite a bit of it from life, if not the whole process. So yeah, take from that what you will.
Yeah, I don't do commission work, but yeah, being around Louis, which he's here, he does both. And very impressive how he can paint children from life. And
Yeah. I was like missing our sessions a couple months ago and had a friend come over and I just painted her while she painted something, because hiring model is still intimidating a lot of the time. And so she was moving the whole time because she was working. And man, that was a painting exercise on a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's like a whole different, could have a whole different skill set to it.
Yeah. It's a fun painting though. It wound up being super loose because what else are you gonna do? Like there's so many moving parts, literally, that getting super tight and specific wasn't feasible.
I think it's cool when the painting reflects the environment that, you know, you were working in.
Yeah.
So like it wouldn't make sense to even have it so tight if she was moving all the time. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
I always think of James Gurney and watching him when he paints people from life that are just moving around in like a diner. I remember he was at one of the Portrait Society and he was just painting the people at the paint off and like just nailed them, and they're moving around constantly, shifting all over the place. And I remember it was like, I think it was David Casson and Jeff Hine, and I mean just absolutely nailed their likeness. Wow. And then posted it that night. Like this blows my mind. Yep.
All right, well.
Yeah, that's like I've seen actually several people. I've seen several instances of this, of being in New York City on the subway and seeing people drawing other passengers, and just all of the movement and craziness in the surroundings. It's like, I don't understand how you can do this.
I need to paint the face. Not everything else but the face.
What a
I
mood.
feel better now that I know you're not at the face.
Maria Crean asks Chelsea, what color mix did you use in the shadow? On TV, it has a lovely lavender hue. I think that's correct, yeah.
Still her skin tone, but the parts that are getting a little bit less light? If so, the answer to that is Terra Rosa, Titanium White, and Viridian. There might be like a couple other incidental colors that just kind of made their way into that mixture, but I don't think they would be having a significant impact. But yeah, Terra Rosa and Ultramarine and then Titanium White make a really nice lavender, and there are some parts of this that have that mixture happening.
Felicity Bergstrom asks, how are you all inspired? Is it to say something, or is it the beauty of the abstract visual elements, or to explore a particular subject? Do ideas come to you, or just do you search for them?
Well, the last question, it's definitely both. Either an idea will come to me, or I'll finish a painting and it'll be like, well, I need to start another painting. What's gonna be the idea, buddy? And I have to find it somehow. And then the other questions, I feel like a lot I'm just drawn by the beauty of the subject and scenery, but I want and have been trying to be more intentional about the actual narrative going on. But by my nature, I think I am just drawn to a beautiful subject and painting it beautifully and just the beauty aspect and the aesthetic.
What about you, Erica?
I am thinking, what inspires me? Sorry, I was focusing on my painting, so I was not paying attention. I would say there are a lot of things in nature, just overall, I think that's probably what inspires me, and that, I'll think about my subject matter, or look for something, but it probably falls under an umbrella of something relating to nature. And so, I paint a lot of plants. I just painted some shells. I like to paint people, I do a little bit of everything, but at the end of the day, it probably has something to do with nature. But then I really enjoy the abstract elements of a painting, like all of those kind of compositional and design things. I find that really fascinating, like how our brains work and how we look at information and then, follow a painting and stay in it and all that stuff. And so I do try to incorporate, or at least, consider those elements in my own paintings.
How are we on answering that question? Because I feel like there were a lot of parts.
I mean, I think that pretty much, addresses it, because it's such a personal and yet widely open-ended question. So I think, it's also very much dependent on the piece and the message you're trying to convey, or what about a particular composition is captivating to you. And so just to whatever extent, you are able to answer that. But along that vein, I'm also curious to hear from y'all what, right now, and looking at this amazing model, is kind of most inspiring to you. Are there certain shapes that you're really drawn to, or is it something about the lighting? Or I know you all have commented on the Viridian and her skin tone being really lovely. Do you want to just extrapolate on that a little bit more for us?
Personally, I just think our model has such an interesting look. I love her face, love her skin, her glance, the whole energy. So a lot of character. So I'm trying to do some sort of homage to that.
Yeah, I feel like most of the time, if I am drawn to paint something, the light and the color wind up being a very large part of that. So I think on this particular model and this lighting, I am really enjoying the challenge of capturing all of the nuance, and how her skin is so alive and has so much nuance in those little tonal shifts. But it's going to be something a little bit different with every model. Some of them I really like it's more about the value statement and some of the shapes in terms of the shadow pattern. And sometimes it's not the model, that's just the setup. But I think regardless of what I'm working on, I really need the light to be interesting, either because of the value or because of the color. I have a lot of really cool photos that I couldn't paint from because it's lacking that information.
All right, everyone. Well, we've got some really exciting news. Whoever remembers Nicholas Thorpe, who has been a part of our East Oaks family this past year and has been part of a Painting from Life many, many times, he and his wife Savannah just had their first baby girl named Adelaide Thorpe. For any of y'all who remember him, we want you to know that they have a beautiful, healthy baby. He's 7 pounds, 2 ounces. And we are all so very excited for both of you. And for congratulations to the both of you.
Yay! Congratulations, Nick! So I think we are approaching another break. We do have some other questions, but I think I'll save them for the next session. But in the meantime, I just want to say y'all have been getting a lot of love from everybody on here, and Nick is now getting many congratulations. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We got just a couple, maybe like one more minute yet, I believe.
Less than a minute now.
1 minute mark now, and then we'll be taking another break. Thanks so much, y'all.
Race.
That's how I make my best decisions.
Just rushing. Oh, this is one of those moments where I realized I should have been backing up a lot more this whole time.
Yep, I just had that realization too.
Yeah. Like, anytime I lose by backing up, I gain from making better decisions.
Gosh, I am screwing this up.
All right, y'all, and that is our model marks. So we will be back after yet another break. Keep sending in your comments, keep saying hi. Any questions you have, we'll do our best to answer them. And yeah, thank you so much. For joining, y'all.
So Erica, I have a question specifically for you. I was curious, just with your first week starting at East Oaks, I was wondering what's like the main thing that you picked up learning wise, even if they're things that you already knew but they're just cemented in. Just what was like the first kind of two things that were like that stuck out to you?
I'm excited to hear this answer.
So I did just a little 9x12 shell still life just to get my feet wet. And I was excited because I have already learned so much. And I would say the main thing is edges, probably edges. And it's like I knew soft and sharp edges are important. Don't look at my painting for an example of how to do a soft edge.
Relatable.
But finding different ways of painting soft and sharp edges, and conceptually like how to think of things in space, and using your thick and thin paint with edges, and so finding just more sophisticated ways of considering edges. And so that's been a thing that I was focusing on this week. And yeah, that's probably the main thing that sticks out to me right now, but also color harmony and other ways of harmonizing a painting through paint application and color selection, and how to synchronize all of these things into a piece. And so I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, so we've got another question from Neeks, who asks, if someone has never attended an art class but has learned painting purely by watching YouTube tutorials, would they still be classified as quote-unquote self-taught?
I think that definition is largely up to you. Like Alex, I know you've talked about considering yourself to be self-taught in many ways. So at the end of the day, I think I don't think the art police are gonna come and, check your self-taught ID card.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you taught yourself through watching YouTube videos, it just kind of means you didn't go to a school and have a teacher that came and critiqued you and for a long period of time. I don't know. But yeah, it's up to you, whatever you want it to mean.
Yeah, I know there's this whole category of like quote unquote outsider art. And I don't know if that terminology really applies quite so much to a fine art sort of sphere. But yeah, I agree. It's really like kind of up to your own preference and how you identify. I'm sure there's many artists out there probably who were formally taught and still maybe consider themselves self-taught in many ways, just because they kind of developed their own style, So yeah, there's a lot of different answers there.
Or even if they went to art school but didn't learn a single thing about the technique of the particular field that they wanted to be in,
And so then they went to go study ceramics instead.
Exactly. Or sculpture. So, I mean, that most certainly was a similar case for me. That I got an art degree at the University of Mississippi, and then ended up having to, for various reasons, having to emphasize in a completely different field than painting. And so I was still consider myself up to that point self-taught until I actually went to Grand Central Atelier, because for the most part there was no one helping me with the technique of painting. There was only people helping me with the conceptualizing side of painting.
Whereas I kind of considered myself self-taught until I met Lewis, because I went to an art school and got a BFA. And I entered a painting program that was, very quickly I realized it wasn't what I was looking for. So then I went and studied something else, and, years later the stars aligned. So yeah, you never know. There's always more than one answer. Mustafa says, East Oak Studio always brings professional models. I guess next session they will bring Scarlett Johansson.
Imagine.
I know, I'm just picturing any of us with ScarJo's phone number.
That is funny.
What would you guys do with Timothy Chalamet and Buckshot?
Bone structure.
You're an artist win. Oh man, okay.
To finish that sentence, you're an artist when you look at somebody that's very beautiful and you go, wow, you have such a nice muzzle.
Yeah, once you start to learn a little anatomy, things become really interesting.
I feel like this is the result of like my time dancing. It's like very interested in what people's feet look like. I'm like, oh gosh, that's the whole thing.
I've never.
I feel like that could be like a meme or something, like artists complimenting people or trying to, and just being like, oh yeah, you have such a nice zygomatic arch. Yeah, it's really, really great.
Oh, it takes me back to art school.
So for our next question from Miguel, let's see. He asks, how do you feel about studying under a master or group? Most of Odd Nerdrum students' paintings look the same, whereas Richard's painters and even some that resemble you, I think maybe is what he meant. does it ever bother any of you? In my opinions, sometimes they're a little redundant. It seems these days they can look really similar. Is that something that bothers you, or is it just part of the painting process?
I'm going to let one of Odd Nerdrum's students answer that question.
Yeah, I was an Odd Nerdrum student for 2 months. And painting exactly like him is a choice that the students make, which is really interesting. Like, it's not like he was like, you should be painting more like me. You know.
In that voice.
Yeah.
So I think he just has such, like, artists that go study with him see him like such as an idol that they want to emulate him. And part of his teaching is to, you know, emulate your sort of master and stuff like they did in the workshops back in the day of the old masters. And he painted a lot like Caravaggio for a season. He painted a lot like Rembrandt for a season, and then eventually kind of ended up painting like Odd Nerdrum. But yeah, a lot of his students do end up looking exactly the same, and it bothers me that it doesn't bother them a little bit. Because they kind of maybe aren't getting the full grip of what they should be learning, and they're just picking up, you know, little tricks to make a painting look like Odd Nerdrum. Anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me as much, I think, as it does bother some other people, but it kind of can be a shame to some degree.
I was just in a workshop where the instructor basically made a comment to this effect that, like, there are some really, really excellent painters, and it's a shame that their students look alike. And, you know, what that artist was saying was that, in their opinion, that comes from not understanding what really made that painter special. Like, if the students had understood that, then they probably would have a lot more uniquity in their work.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that for a long time, but I'm still trying to, like, wrap my head around it, I think.
Erica, when you were in Florence, did you ever experience anything kind of like that, or like, I don't know, maybe this speaks to like only specific instructors, but yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard people say, you know, I've heard criticisms before about, you know, I think there was some paint or some image and of different long poses, but people were commenting that they all looked the same, as if it were a criticism. I think that when you're studying, you know, and everyone's trying to do realism, it's going to look similar to a certain extent. And I think that's part of the process when you're learning, is you're going to copy, or you're going to like bring it to a point where maybe it looks similar to something. But I think at least when I was a student, you know, that wasn't really, people weren't pedantic about it. People weren't saying like, this is the right way and everything else is wrong. Like, none of that was ever really vocalized to me. I think that, in fact, when I was a student, it was a big deal to think like you have to understand the method and then figure out a way for it to work for you, and understand the concepts, and knowing that your handwriting will vary, and that's a good thing. And so I think that it takes time for that to sink in and for it to work itself out. But that subject though was important, that, like, you know, having a diverse way of applying these concepts and having paintings look different from each other is a valuable and beautiful thing. But when you're a student and you're all trying to, make the model look like the model and have the likeness, and you're just trying to figure out what is a shadow shape and proportions, I think that there are priorities. There's a time and a place. So if you feel like you don't have that handwriting yet, don't worry, it'll come.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. It's like it is necessary to go through that, I think. At first, it just...
Yeah, I mean, how would you even know?
Sure, yeah, you eventually... Because I looked at a lot of... In my self-teaching, I was looking at a lot of Jeremy Lipking. And when I would... There was like a couple times where I asked an artist to kind of look over my portfolio and give me their general advice and critique. And it would be like, it looks too much like Jeremy Lipking. And I'd be like, okay, good to know. And then eventually, I mean, you just keep learning from different sources, and your taste change, and you try new things, and yourself comes out of it eventually.
I think that's a really good way to describe it, that like if you keep practicing long enough, your taste will ultimately like govern, what was the word that you used, Erica? Your handwriting? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, if you're learning piano and you copy a song, I mean, you're going to want to play the song and, that's kind of how it starts, but then you learn how to develop, what you care about, and, or even another analogy is like cooking. You follow a recipe at first, but then you figure out what tastes you have, what flavors you like, and where to push and pull, and you learn new techniques, and then you finally find a way of creating your own dish. So.
Well, this seems to be a good, fun topic because all of y'all are firing away. I love this. I wanted to also just dovetail off of what everyone was saying, which is that when you're studying, it is another step in your journey to understanding and preparing yourself with a vocabulary that, in order to understand sort of parameters and rules, and then understanding how to create your own poetry is how you break those rules intentional ways later. The problem is that oftentimes there's not a nurturing environment to allow for you to feel that you're at your liberty to be able to push off of what I call the rift. Like when you need to learn to start riffing off of the things you already know. If everything that we do is based off of us standing on the shoulders of giants, then we need to understand what is it that's uniquely a riff that we are doing off of others' experience that we've learned up to that point. So, the hardest thing, or the pitfall, I think, of being at a school, and there's nothing wrong with going to a program. I most certainly attribute a lot of my skill to my training, but is to not get into the place where you are fearful of moving past what you have found you think is like the truth of the academia of what you learned, and have a fear of actually riffing off of it to create your own identity in your work. And honestly, that's what part of East Oaks is all about, is pushing the idea of that next step in your journey once you've been trained to start going, what do I care about? How do I want my work to look? And am I in an environment that helps encourage that?
And to that end, I think a way to know if you're in an environment that's going to ultimately give you the space to go on that journey is, like, there are specific kind of red flags you can look out for. And one of them is if there's a lot of dogma around, like, this is good art and everything else is bad, run.
Do you have personal experience?
Yes, I do.
Personal experience with that.
And interestingly, Erica, when you were sharing, like the example of everyone looking at like the long pose. I was in an environment where I think we would have all looked at the long pose and like someone would have said, now this is actual art. This is what we're all aspiring to.
Yeah.
And definitely kind of reinforcing that kind of homogeneous, there we go, quality. Cool. All right, I feel like I solved some significant color problems and I can take a breath.
Penny asks, what is each of your favorite surfaces to paint on? Lead prime, oil prime, or acrylic prime? And to that end, do you have a favorite brand?
Well, what I paint on the most, almost all of my paintings are painted on lead primed ACM panel, and the lead is Rublev Natural Pigments brand. But I do really enjoy working on oil primed as well. It just takes a longer time, and the difference isn't that crazy that I tend to stick with the lead.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting night to get that question, just because I'm working on a surface that I have not worked on in a very long time, and it definitely has given me some trouble, but I think it's also kind of resulted in me painting differently than I have lately, and that's been actually like quite fun. And I'm not sure if that difference is more about the fact that this is a lead primed surface, or if it's the fact that I'm working on portrait linen, which has very little texture. And you know, as Alex pointed out earlier, this is definitely not a good fit for these like ivory synthetic bristle brushes that I'm using. I think it's kind of interesting because it's forced me to experiment and enjoy going back to like older habits in a way that's kind of playful and fun. And Alex and Divya say they like it, so I'm taking that. But typically I work on a Clausen's medium weave double oil primed linen on MDF panels.
With almond milk and stevia instead of sugar, with stir, with some foam.
What?
It was a bad joke.
Okay.
Where
That was okay.
Nick Nicometti says, greetings from Buffalo. And Penny asks, what is each of your favorite surfaces to paint? Oh, wait, no. I'm sorry. I already read that one. Wait, Erica, I don't think we got an answer from you, though.
So I've been painting on Artifacts. I think it's their lead alkyd ground, their panels, linen. Right now I'm painting on linen, but it's either their linen on the panel or they're just normal panel with just the ground straight up on it. So one of those two. And I really like it. I like how I can move the paint around and I don't have to add medium in order to move it around at the beginning of a painting. I try not to use too much medium, like oil or anything. Try to limit my solvent use. And so this ground has enough, like, for lack of better words, like slipperiness, where I can move things around. So I like that. Depending on the project, I'll go between linen and just straight up gesso ground. And, you know, because it just gives slightly different effects. If it's a longer term project, I might choose canvas because I can kind of work in and out of it maybe more than if I just do on straight ground. But I'm also kind of, I want to figure out how to do my own, how to make my own and apply it myself, and I would like to practice a little bit more with that.
It will definitely save you money.
Jose Rivera says, I'm considering going to the Portrait Society convention in 2023 for the first time. Any advice for a first timer to get the most out of it? I'm concerned that it will be overwhelming.
Only losers go.
Wait, what did you just say?
Don't go.
Did you just say only losers go?
Yeah.
I'm going.
I am
I think
also
like
going.
almost everyone in
We're all
this room is
going.
going but me.
I see. Is there some FOMO happening?
No, you're just losers.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. It's nothing about you,
No,
just
it's
about
never-
us.
Yeah, it's never about me.
My first time was this past year, and I think I brought more stuff than I needed. I think something to record notes on, and then potentially drawing materials is like really all that you need. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that someone might possibly.
Chelsea, did you go out of your way to make conversations with specific artists?
Oh gosh, this is, yeah, okay, you got me. So one thing that set me up to have a really nice time was that I had other painters I wanted to meet up with, and we wound up basically spending the conference hanging out. And that way, if like there were 2 sessions that we wanted to attend that were at conflicting times, like we could kind of split up the group and ask people like, oh, what did you learn from this particular session? And that was quite nice. I understand that advice isn't going to be super helpful for everybody, but I think if you might possibly know other people there and your friends beforehand, it's a really nice opportunity to get like that artistic refueling and recharging. What was I just about to paint?
Oh. Hey, I did this last time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, going with a friend, that would be good advice. Because the time I went, it was lonely by myself.
Yeah, I think I would have had a very different experience if I only knew people in a like strictly professional sense.
We should all just go together next year.
Yeah, Alex.
Sorry, losers only.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't even know where. It might be in Australia at that point. I don't even know.
2023 is in DC. It's drivable for us.
No, I'll be in Australia.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Oh, you thought I was saying it might be in Australia. No, I might be. Therefore.
Well, I mean, I guess that's an okay. Well, I don't know.
I think it's a quick flight back. I mean,
Yeah, just hop right over.
Come on back, yeah. 16-hour flight,
Okay.
26 hours of travel. It's layovers.
convenient.
I might be absolutely cursing my next painting from Life Painting, but I do find it remarkable how there's like an inevitable point in every painting from life session where I'm like, well, this is, yep, nope, this one's just not gonna get there. And then somehow we persevere. Okay, maybe I shouldn't generalize. This is definitely just me that I'm speaking for, anyway.
You don't think we persevere?
I'm just gonna stop talking.
So our next question from Neeks is, would you add Venetian red to skin tone mixes? I find that it makes other colors muddy really fast. And I'm going to add an extender question on that is, how do you avoid muddy colors?
I say a prayer.
I think thinking about value is probably helpful. So if things are looking muddy, maybe something is too dark or something else is too light, and so it's kind of disrupting your perception of the colors and the values. And so sometimes it's not even a color thing, it's just I mean, they're inherently linked, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that is a good answer. Like when something looks dirty, usually, yeah, value's wrong, not compressed enough or something. And then if it's not a value thing, it's usually like there's too many warms next to each other or there's too many cools next to each other. And you need to kind of make it vibrate a bit more with opposite color temperatures, or either warm and cool or neutral and higher chroma, something like that. So maybe that red, that specific red, is just kind of polluting everything, so everything just has red on red, just different values, and it's making it look muddy for you.
And this next question perhaps ties in a little nicely to one of the previous ones that I think it was Miguel who asked. Let's see. Laura asks, how do you each try and distance yourself from other artists?
My strategy is to hide in my house and limit interactions.
Literally hiding.
Today you have failed.
Distance yourself from other artists. Should we be trying to do that?
It's helpful.
I feel like the opposite, that I actually needed to be around other artists. It's one of the reasons why I joined E Stokes. But I do think that there's a difference, of course, between community and like not understanding necessarily, or like if you're trying to figure out what you want to paint and what you want to say, and you feel like maybe you're being influenced by other people too much, if that's how you're feeling, maybe that's what that means, then I don't know, I feel like this is where sketchbooks, journals, you know, just kind of paying attention in your life to what you care about and really just using those tools to break those things down. And that way you're focusing on what you care about and really getting into tune with that. Kind of an in-out approach rather than a outside-in approach.
Yeah, I took that to mean more of a stylistic or, you know, sort of like school of thought or, you know, something like that, rather than, you know, actual proximity, like physical proximity to somebody. Because I think it's great to be around other artists. I think y'all are pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh wait, did somebody want to say something? No, okay. Laura also asks, is there such a thing as stealing a concept from an artist? When does it become almost plagiarism in a way?
I feel like you know when you're doing it.
Yeah.
If you feel guilty.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
feel guilt, then
I will be actually teaching on this through not only our own platform, but with Portrait Society. It's going to be called The Rift, The Art of the Steal. And it will be on exactly that. Where is the fuzzy line of where it feels like you are plagiarizing, and how to do it effectively, and in a way that you're using influences of other people, and how it can be done poorly, where it blatantly looks like you're just taking things from other people and not doing anything with it. So that's original. So stay tuned for that. That will be with Portrait Society first in, I believe, December. And then it will be released at the same time on our platform as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's really a tough question because, some people really prescribe to copying is the ultimate form of flattery, or mimicry is the ultimate form of flattery. And that's a really teeny tiny tightrope to have to walk when you're talking about art. So I think, to an extent, if you're paying homage to somebody, sure, that's flattery rather than plagiarism. But I think, if you're very clearly, stealing specific techniques, or, working directly, like from a reference that somebody else took, or, something like that, then that's a really dangerous area. Yeah, I think this is something that I think a lot of artists have to question as they work. It's like I actually had I was talking with Hollis Dunlap online, and he had described being in Florence and seeing a copy of one of his own paintings in a gallery in Florence. And I was like, oh dude, like that's really crazy. Like, did they give you credit, or like how did you handle that? And I think he responded very respectfully and was just like, they didn't initially give credit, but the curator did put like a little blurb at the bottom that it was a study of one of my paintings. And he took it as a form of flattery. So, it's interesting. You never really know, person to person.
Sting is like, that's just, like, he should get the money from that sale, full stop. Just legally speaking, he is entitled to that. So that's just like an interesting situation, I think. Because I'm pretty sure international copyright law functions given the US model, which is, you put something like that up for sale, there's a specific person who gets paid from that.
Yeah, it's like I had someone message me like yesterday that they just for their own self kind of study copied one of my paintings, and then said that someone was in their studio and wanted to buy it. So they sent me a message and asked me if it was cool if they sold it. So which I was cool with. But I could see how that, it's like if they asked him first, that would be probably good.
Well, I think something that's important there too is like the intention with that was, you know, the artist who was learning from you was trying to learn first and foremost, and
Yeah.
then that opportunity emerged versus, all right, I need to make some money. I'm gonna go copy one of Alex's paintings.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm not sure if in this particular instance if that painting was for sale or not, but I could certainly ask him. That's a very good point, Chelsea.
Okay.
Derek Cohey says, "Good to see you again, East Oaks." And Chelsea, "You're slowly becoming an East Oaks face."
Why are you laughing?
Okay, our next question. Well, let's see. We've got some other statements first that I can go through. Penny says, "Thank you for the high quality reference photos. They're getting better and better. I'm not painting along tonight, but I can't wait to paint this great model from the great ref shots you shared. Thanks." And then asks, let's see, "Would you not paint from these reference photos taken and posted on the site?"
The distinction here is that those are intended for public consumption, and I don't know if you guys have like a policy where you say that people could potentially like sell paintings they make from these reference photos, or yeah, there's like specific legal considerations that typically are made known if somebody makes reference available.
Yeah, I think typically just for anybody out there that may have an image that somebody else took that they want to use as a reference, really, you know, the proper approach is to ask permission and get that permission in writing. But yeah, if it's through a avenue such as East Oaks, where, you know, this is the intended function of these images and we give, you know, license to you to use them in that way, then absolutely go for it. And that was our model break bell alarm. So we've got this last one, I believe, and then we've got one more session afterwards. So if you have any burning questions left, it's speak now or forever hold your peace, or at least hold your peace till next month. So. Carolina Elizabeth says, "I admire beautiful shadows that some artists can accomplish, usually along the neck of a model or at times on the hands. I'd appreciate any suggestions on keeping those shadows glowing."
I find in general not to put white in your shadows to help them look less chalky and keep them warm. And then sometimes we oversee how dark a shadow is. Sometimes it's not actually as dark or as black as it might instinctually feel. And so really looking at that shadow relationship to the rest of your setup can be a good way of ensuring that your shadows stay nice and glowy, as you say.
Yeah, definitely Definitely not going too dark with your shadows, but just paying more attention to making them feel separate from the light, but also I feel like to key my shadows slightly brighter. And I feel like it's because I think I'm going to creep up on the value, so I start kind of light, but then I end up thinking aesthetically that the lighter value looks better. So I end up somewhere that is slightly lighter. And I also try not to put any white in my shadows either.
Yeah, it's helpful to understand your contrast between your shadow and your light, for example. And if you think of your value scale, that doesn't necessarily mean, like, if you have values 1 through 7, that shadows are 7 and highlights are white. Like, your scale can be closer together, and yet you can still get a sense of contrast. Like, you know, I was, like, one way it was told to me, like, the shadow is there to reveal the light, and sometimes it's enough for maybe your shadow to be a value 3 or a value 4, like, you know, depending on your setup. You know, really observing and seeing what you need in that situation.
Adrian says, I'm unable to paint along, but I'm practicing the art of cooking while watching. So yeah, way to go, Adrian.
Okay. The tricky part. I am pretty much happy with it. And I don't see what obviously I should do next, and I don't want to ruin it.
I think kind of like responding to that, Chelsea, like how do you all kind of approach your editing process towards the end of a painting like this? Like, how do you prioritize, you know, the painting's needs towards the end of a session?
I will say one thought that I don't know, not a thought, but like an instruction I just gave myself was, you've been working on the big picture this whole time. You need to trust it's working, and as a result, you should not be making any big changes at this stage. Like, anything I do now should be small. But Alex's noise that he just made me like really self-conscious about that. So
No, I just agree. I agree with you.
Oh, good.
Because
That wasn't a
yeah, no. It's like, for better or for worse, we're gonna say that the big stuff is right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
but the last 20 minutes, safe to say.
And that's probably a different experience, you know, working Alla Prima and like having the model go home. Kind of just need to commit and cope.
There's a degree of acceptance that happens at this stage, where it's, you know, I mean, if you scrape off your whole painting right now, then you have no painting. So it's like, right now, work with what you have. And yeah, like for me, my goal is to cover the canvas. That would be great. So I know that I can't get too worked up on details and you know, that way, because if I do that, then I won't have my overarching goal of at least having an impression of the model. So
That's like whatever the stages, denial, anger, depression, bartering, grief, acceptance, or whatever. Like, that's the end of a painting. I will say, just to add on to Carolina's question as well, hands are kind of notorious for being difficult for people to learn how to paint. Do all of you guys have any recommendations for Carolina learning how to paint hands?
I think there's some anatomical, like if you understand the major planes of the hands, like understanding these two like wedges, like you have your kind of palm wedge and you have your finger wedges, and then kind of slowly breaking those down into planes, understanding your major proportional relationships. I think it can be really helpful for getting a hand to look like a hand when you're starting, and then finding the individuality over time.
Yeah, that's good. See, I'm about to give advice, but I think it's more aesthetic. But again, just like with shadows, with hands, be super careful to not go too dark in like all the creases in between the fingers and on the knuckles, and if anything, error on the side of making those things a bit brighter, and it's going to look a bit better.
Yeah, I think to that point, you can think of them as being mitten-like. I think that sort of speaks to exactly what you were saying, Erica, that like the more you let the fingers kind of fuse together where appropriate in the drawing, the more elegant I think the final product will likely look.
It's cool to look at paintings, for example, from Sargent or someone, and looking at the hands, and then imagining what the original hand would have looked like, and kind of seeing what information he kept and what he didn't. You can kind of work backwards and to understand priority information.
Maybe one of these days for a painting from life session, we'll have to get a hand model in, and we can all do hand paintings.
I'll be sick that week.
You already know.
No, that does sound really cool.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Becca G asks, what kind of white paint do you use for portraits, especially for color mixing?
What kind of white paint? Is that what you said? Lead white #2.
Yeah, white.
Lead white #2, Rublev, natural pigments. Boom.
Yeah, I second the lead white. If you use titanium, it really cools things down, and it's not that you can't use it or you can't make a good portrait. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just that the transparency in lead lends itself to creating some really interesting warms and chromatic flesh tones. So.
And I'm not using lead right now, actually. But usually I do.
But yeah.
At the same time, you usually don't for painting from life though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right now I'm not. And I get a similar result, I think.
Permalba?
Yes. Permalba.
I feel like we talk about Permalba white like at some point every time. So along that vein, I want to ask you guys about flashing, because I did not know that term until Lewis taught it to me a few weeks ago. But I know that is very much determined by the type of white you use. So could y'all maybe speak to times that you've encountered it, or you know, if you've ever encountered it, how can you perhaps remedy it?
I'm gonna need a
I've not
definition.
experienced this. I just learned about it this week, but yeah.
Sure.
Or
It's the phenomenon when your paint pigment darkens after it dries and causes there to be dark splotches from one section to another, typically happening in a second layer when you're trying to value match what you've already put down. And even if you've oiled out and you value match, it dries, and when it dries darker.
Gotcha. Erica, I feel like you should reinforce your knowledge by like talking about this. I forget what the actual question was, like how do you mitigate it or something like that, but.
Well, I mean, I don't really use titanium for the portrait,
shoot.
so.
Well, I'm trying to think, like, could this happen with any titanium mixture, or is it more likely when you have a lot of titanium mixture?
I honestly don't know.
I feel like it's when there's parts that have it and then parts that don't. So then they don't kind of,
They don't fuse. in a way.
yeah, they don't fuse up as well as they could.
Interesting.
Oh God.
I feel like as like the person here who uses it, I should speak to it, but I
But hey, if you haven't really come across it, then
mean, I'm sure I have, maybe just not consciously.
So this is a rare area where my ceramics education actually lends itself to painting, and a background in chemistry. So titanium tends to be a very absorbent metal, and so when it's applied as a paint, that's kind of why the flashing can happen, because it's a reaction of it sucking up all the oil. And so then it has its own kind of like sunken in effect. I, as of yet, have not quite figured out a way to remedy that, but you know what? That is what having an art journey is all about.
What a lot of people say is the best way to remedy it not happening is that whenever you're painting into a form or an area, just paint through the entire area, or do a form of couching at the beginning, and that would allow for the variance of darker and lighter, at least in edge work. If you were to like put down a few pieces of paint in the middle of a form, by themselves, they're a higher likelihood of being darker pigments later. But if you paint through the entire form another layer, then you're less likely to see a shift, because all of it will shift together.
Thank you. Okay.
Ben Valentine says, it's nice hanging out with you guys when you do this. And Becca asks, what kind of, oh wait, no, sorry. Excuse me. Gail wanted to reconfirm what flashing is. If you've got any questions about it, you can just send us a message. But yeah, it's a funny little phenomenon. Carolina asks, in the past I've heard that it's best that the light comes in from the top left rather than the right. Does something about how we read a work, it's something about how we read a work. Do you find this to be true, or even think that it matters? I think that it likely really depends on the surface that you're working on and your surrounding environment, but I don't know. Have you guys ever noticed that in here? Like left from right, light source?
I imagine that would apply if you read from left to right. And so maybe if you don't read from left to right, then it might be different.
Is this in terms of like looking at a painting or making a painting?
I think making a painting.
I think while making it.
Okay.
Like the light source of the on the subject matter of the painting.
And the idea was the light source should be on the left?
I think so.
I think this shows that we don't.
Yeah. There are certain directional things I pay attention to, but that's largely to do with like filming, and making sure I like don't block a shot while I'm painting. I'm sure I've thought about light source things, but never enough that I had a unified theory of how to light my workspace, directionally speaking. I think I'm done with this.
I think perhaps this is sort of more asking about like how to avoid glare on the painting as you're working. Yeah, Carolina, if you want to clarify that for us, that might be good. But I think if you are referring to like the glare, then there are, certain different angles that you can have to try to help avoid that. But yeah, I think it just depends on your environment. And David Baird says, I think if you try to use a medium without any solvent, you won't have as much of a problem with flashing. Just good to know. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Something I'm noticing between all three of your paintings, her blouse is super chromatic. Do you have any maybe either like personal preferences or advice on balancing like super high chroma moments with more neutrals and perhaps like skin tone or background?
I feel like this is an active struggle in my painting, so I should not speak to this.
I always try to think of the big picture and how something is in context. And so, something you can use something really chromatic, but seeing how it relates to other elements in the image. I think as well, like, for something not to look isolated, trying to see how it repeats somewhere else. Maybe not at the same strength, but finding where there's some of the blue in her skin, or finding where there's some of her skin in that blue, and that'll help it feel less kind of like it sticks out.
And that is time, y'all. Thank you so much to everybody who took time out of their evening to come and join us. And to those who painted along, I hope you had a lot of fun. We all certainly had a lot of fun making this. So yeah, anybody that wants to either continue on their paintings or paint later, yeah, please share them with us. We'd love to see them.
Thank you, Riley.
Thank you. You did great.
Thank you.
Have a good night, y'all. Thank you so much.